This is the video that goes with week 3 lecture on candies. Again, I'm going to assume here that you've looked through the PDF and you've tried the problems on your own, and I'm just going to go over the solutions here. So what we did was we took this original script from week 2 where we had our candy cost and our end candies, and we had calculated the sum of the cost in 2 different ways. So this was the way we'd done it in week 1, where we explicitly multiplied each one out. And then in week 2, we showed that you could just do an element-wise operation where you take all the values in here, multiply by these, and then sum them up. So what we're going to do just as a demo is show how you would actually calculate this on your own with a for loop. Now, normally I would never recommend doing a sum in a for loop by yourself. You might as well just call sum, but this is a case of showing you what works under the hood. So I'm going to switch here to the final script. So a lot of this looks very similar to what we had before. We have our candy costs here, just as we did before. We've added one piece here. So this string candies, you'll notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, named just like the 1, 2, 3, 4 above us. But in this case, we've got curly brackets and we've got strings in here. So this is a way to make an array of strings. It's called a cell structure. We'll come back to what that actually means later. For the time being, just think of this as a way to make arrays of strings. And the reason you want arrays of strings is so that in your for loop, you can loop over these values as well as looping over these values. So a couple changes here. Remember, we're going to make our own sum here. So if you're going to do a sum, first thing you need to do is declare a variable to keep that sum in. So here, do not call your variable sum, because if you call your variable sum, the command will no longer work. So we'll call this my cost candy. We're going to set it to 0 because we haven't got any cost yet. Remember, when you're doing a for loop, you always want to have this depend on the length of the sum you're adding up. In case we go and change the length of all of our candies, we add another candy in, we want this loop to still work. So this says start at 1 and go through all of the elements in candies. Now you'll notice here I've pulled out a couple pieces here. So I've pulled out the cost candy and then I added up. So this never hurts to break up computation this way. I could take all of this and put it in here, but the reason to split this up is because what I want to do is I want to figure out, okay, this is for this specific candy. We know we're doing a specific candy because this is K here, right? So we're going to take the candy cost for the kth element. We're going to multiply it by the number of candies that we want of that type. We calculate this variable, and then we come down here and we want to print it out. So because we want to print it out, I split it up because we want it in this sum, which is take the cost of the current candy and add it to what I've got. And I want it to show up there, and I want it to show up here. The other thing to notice here is this formation here. This always looks a little odd to people when they first start doing for loops. What you want to read this as is take my current value that I am summing up, so this is my sum so far, and I'm going to add to it this value, and then I'm going to put it back into the same cost again. So when you're doing weeks 1 and week 2, these two variables had different names, S0 and S1. But if they have different names, there's no way for the for loop to remember that value as you're going through the for loop. So this is, you really want to kind of read this as S0 and S1. All right, so a couple other things here. So here we are writing down end candies. You'll notice that, so this is end candies has our usual %0.0f. This one here has our %s. So this is a string. So this tells MATLAB not to look for a number, but to look for a string. And the specific string you want is string candies. And you'll notice the curly brackets here. This tells MATLAB to get a string out of this array of strings instead of getting a number. And the last but not least, we added one other little piece here, which is an if statement. So this is a typical use of an if statement. You're going to ask, is my value more than I wanted to spend? If so, I can print out the amount that I overspent. If not, that I can do this. All right, let's run this and see what happens. So here's cost candy. It's 0. Right now, K doesn't exist. There's no variables. But when we step here, K gets set to the first value here, which is 1. Now the kth value here, so candy cost, remember, is this 4 dimensional array because we're getting the first one. We're going to get the value 35. And we're going to get the first value out of here, which is 2. So this should be 35 times 2, which is 70. Voila, we got the right answer. Now we take that 70 and we add it to our variable, which is currently 0. And when we do this, my cost candy is suddenly going to be 70. So we've replaced the value with the sum of the first cost. We do this one print statement, and if we go to the command window, we can see here it says added 2 of rock candy. So now that name gets stuck in here. So this is why we might want to do arrays of strings. At a cost of 35 cents for a total of 70 cents. Now we can print out the cost so far. So one last little thing. So K is 1 right here. You'll notice I am not changing K anywhere here. See, so I'm down at the bottom of the loop. That's where that green arrow is. I'm going to take one step. I pop back up to here, and MATLAB has set K to be 2 for me. Never set K in this for loop. It will go poorly. MATLAB will just overwrite it. So now when we go through, we're going to grab the second element out of candy cost and the second element out of n candies, which is 5 times 10 is 50. Now we're going to take our current value of 70. We're going to add 50 to it, which gives us 120. Rinse and repeat 4 more times. 1, 2. There we go. And now K is 4, so we should be done. And this time, instead of going back up to the top of the loop, MATLAB's going to come out of the loop. So we've now walked through the for loop. All right, last but not least, let's look at this if statement. So in this case, we have my cost of candy is bigger than to spend. So we will do this first if statement instead of the second one. And then we are done. We go look, and there's all of our print statements, once for each time through the loop, and that if statement.